evening and welcome to Hardfire. My name is Mark AXINN. I'm your host tonight for another half-hour discussion of politics and contemporary events from a libertarian perspective. Tonight, my guest is Dr. Steven Finger. Dr. Steve is a ENT doctor here in Brooklyn, but when he is not looking in people's ears or down their throats, he's got pen in hand and he has taken a column and he writes for the Canarsie Courier, a brilliant column called The Pointing Finger. Steve, welcome to Hardfire.
Thank you, Mark. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Can you show me a copy of the newspaper and tell me what it looks like?
Well, here it is, Mark, right here.
Excellent. Okay, so Steve, let's get right into it. What made you decide to start writing?
Well, I've been a libertarian for longer than I've been a doctor, and I just wanted to write some articles for Canarsie Courier. Canarsie Courier, by the way, is the oldest newspaper in Brooklyn. It's the oldest weekly newspaper in Brooklyn, and they came to me and said, well, I'm the oldest living human being in Brooklyn, and so we were a perfect match. Here we are.
Sounds good. And where do you get your ideas from for subject matter?
Right out of the newspapers. Whatever is most contemporary and needs to be elucidated with a libertarian slant, that's the article.
Right. Well, why don't we get into an article? Your first article is entitled, "You Can Have Your Medicare and Eat It Too."
Right. Well, my first article discusses Medicare. A lot of people know that Medicare is the health insurance program for people 65 years or over, and it's going broke. It's going bankrupt. And the question is what to do about it, because you can't get rid of Medicare. Too many people are dependent on it. If you speak to people who are on Medicare, they don't even talk about it as being Medicare. They talk about it as the Medicare, because it's really sacred to them. And I had an idea that we might make some changes and save Medicare without destroying it, without changing it too much. And that's where I got the title, "You Can Have Your Medicare and Eat It Too."
Okay, so why don't you give us a reading from that piece?
Okay. Medicare provides medical care for people age 65. It covers 80% of medical costs, and since most people have supplemental insurance to cover the other 20%, and since doctors are not allowed to charge more than the government says they can charge, it provides essentially free medical care. So what's wrong with that? Sounds like a great system. What's bad about free? Well, the problem is that people tend to overuse things when they're free, even medical care. You probably won't want to have your leg cut off just because it's free, but you might want a lot of other stuff that you might not need or want if you had to pay for them. For instance, "Doctor, I can't hear so good. Please send me for an MRI and a CAT scan." "Well, Mr. Schwartz, why don't you let me clean the wax out of your ears first and see if that takes care of the problem?" "Doctor, it could be a brain tumor. Don't worry, the Medicare will pay for everything. And also, maybe I should have a PSA just in case." "But you're a woman. You don't have a prostate. Why do you want a PSA test?" "You never know. And besides, the Medicare will pay, right?" A little far-fetched, maybe, but maybe not as much as you think. Is it any wonder that Medicare is going bankrupt? The bottom line is that there are only two realistic ways to control medical costs. The first is to have a system with patients paying part of the costs so they have an incentive to control them. And the second is the dreaded R word, rationing. President Obama has, unfortunately, in my opinion, chosen to go the rationing route without calling it that. If Medicare spending exceeds a designated amount, a panel of experts will be assembled and they will decide what and how much care is necessary. Remember how they laughed at Sarah Palin and her death panels. Ha, ha, ha. Silly Sarah. Obama is for life panels. They won't decide who dies and who lives, as Sarah thought. The Obama panels will decide who lives and who dies. You understand the difference, don't you? I don't. I believe that the best way to save Medicare without twisting it into some kind of unrecognizable government pretzel and scaring the pants off seniors and seniors-to-be is simply to remove the price controls. Let doctors set their fees and let patients choose their doctors. Then some doctors will accept Medicare as payment in full, some will charge a little more, some will charge a little less, and the system will not go bankrupt. because government will pay whatever it will pay and then will get out of the way. No, doctors will not be able to charge anything they want. There are too many doctors around to choose from. It's called competition. If your doctor charges a ridiculous fee, you'll pick another, and you'll be able to buy whatever kind of supplemental insurance you want. Works the same way with food, clothing, housing, and everything. And there will be real incentive to keep costs down. And it will be something like, "Doctor, I can't hear so good. Please send me for an MRI and a CAT scan." "Okay, Mrs. Schwartz, if that's what you want, but it will probably cost you $1,000. On second thought, doctor, maybe you could just clean out the wax, and if I still have the problem, I'll call your office tomorrow for a referral."
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
That's very good. So basically what we need to do is clean out the wax for the American public and get them to understand that there is no free lunch, and with medical insurance, just like everything else, somebody has to pay for it.
Somebody has to pay the bill.
And
that's the problem with health insurance, Mark. It's not really health insurance. It's prepaid health care. It's prepaid health care. And all of the incentives are to spend more, we have to, the only way we can save the system is to have some disincentive to spending. It's either that or it's going to be rationing. And the only disincentive is to have the patients pay part of the freight. If the patients pay, they'll be a little more selective as to what gets done.
But shouldn't somebody else pay? Isn't it better to always have, the 1%, the rich people pay for everything, and everybody else can sort of get that free ride? Isn't that better?
Well, that's what happens now. You see, that's why we have the situation that we have now, because everybody, the people that are paying are not the people that are using it, and vice versa. And so there's no incentive to stop spending, no incentive to stop using it, and the costs are completely out of control. So my proposal is that we ask patients to pay part of the bill, and that way they have an incentive not to make such ridiculous demands, not to ask for unlimited amounts of spending. It's either that or it's going to be rationing. There's just no other way.
I've actually heard some people say that doctors are just ordering all sorts of things because you can just check it off on the form.
That's right. That's just the way it is.
And it's a real problem. All right, let's go on to the next subject, which is one that's very near and dear to everyone's heart, and that's education. Now, I know for a fact that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama are strong believers in public education, that the public school systems are fine and that children should be educated in the public schools, preferably taken at birth under control of the government from the very day that they exit the womb, and that certainly the Clintons with Chelsea or the Obamas with his daughters would never, ever send their children anywhere other than a good public, and by public, of course, you mean government school. So right. I assume that's the case, and you've
not exactly.
Not exactly. All right. So let me ask you this: can your kids go to school with the Obama kids?
Well, that happens to be coincidentally the title of my next article. Your kids can go to school with the Obama kids. Well, maybe not the exact same school, but a similar school, i.e. a private school. In case you hadn't noticed, President Obama, who was a staunch supporter of public schooling, sends his kids to a private school. In other words, he's a staunch supporter of public schooling for your kids. The same, incidentally, was true of Presidents Clinton and Carter. The last president who pledged to send his children to a public school was George Washington, who then lived out his life without having any children. Is this a great country or what?
He kept that promise.
That's right. And don't be so quick to accept the excuse that they're the president's kids and we have to make sure they're safe. Remember, these kids travel in a bulletproof limousine, are surrounded by crack Secret Servicemen and women who are armed to the teeth, pledged to take a bullet for the first family, and are backed up by every military asset within 100 miles, except possibly for Luke Skywalker, and that's only because he's been getting a little long in the tooth lately. And they're not safe in any Washington, D.C. public school, but your kids are. If you think you can't afford a private school education, that you can't possibly pay for one for your children, I've got news for you. You can afford it, and you are paying for it. You just might not be getting what you paid for. New York City free public schools cost $19,000 per child per year. Who do you think is paying for all this? How do you spell taxes? And don't think only of all the many taxes you pay while your child is in school. Think before and long, long after. You should be able to use your tax money to pick the school of your choice. Give every child a voucher for $10,000 or so that can be used in any school the parent chooses. Take it out of the education budget. Less kids, less money. Everyone agrees except the teachers' unions. Schools are for educating children. They're not supposed to be jobs programs for teachers. And don't listen to the experts who tell you that you can't possibly know enough to pick the right school for your child. As a doctor who was once a teacher, I can tell you 100% positively and certainly that it's no more difficult to pick a good teacher than it always has been to pick a good pediatrician. In fact, it's easier. And for you math wizards, put 20 kids in a class and you've got $200,000. That's 20 times $10,000. Pay the teacher $100,000. That leaves $100,000 per class for computers, maintenance, heat, electricity, and all the rest. If the money is there and the students are there, the school soon will be. It's the same way auto mechanics and gas stations and personal injury lawyers magically appeared after some guy invented cars. This is a subject that was very near and dear to my heart because when I ran for Congress in 2006, my main platform was school choice. I went into every area and talked about school choice, school choice, school choice, and the opposition said, well, we'll just make the public schools better. Now that was 6 years ago, 7 years ago. That means all the kids that were starting the first grade when I was campaigning are now in the 7th grade. How much better have the schools gotten? The answer is they haven't gotten much better at all. And that means another whole generation of kids is going to be miseducated. And at a time when a graduate degree from MIT is barely enough to get a job at McDonald's, not graduating from high school is a short trip to poverty. And the one other thing that I used to tell people in the district, you know, there were people who were in poor schools, and it was obvious to them they needed a change. But even the people that were in good schools and parents who had money and knew their kids were going to get decent schools, I try to explain to them that even though their kids are going to be educated, if they had no humanitarian reason for wanting the rest of the kids to be educated, they had to be aware of the fact that their children and their grandchildren are going to be living on the same planet with these other kids and with their children and their grandchildren. And if these other kids can't make a living because they're not educated, then they're going to be knocking their grandchildren in the head to steal their money to live.
Well, there's another possibility. And that is, what if we didn't require education? It wasn't mandatory. You know, we have it available. We have private schools available. We have teachers in all sorts of schools available. And we said to them, listen, this kid is not going to be a rocket scientist. This kid doesn't need to learn philosophy, doesn't need to learn history. This kid's going to be an auto mechanic. Why don't we train this kid to be an auto mechanic so he can do what he'll be good at? Our society right now, with compulsory education, requires these kids to be in a government school, which acts more like babysitting half the time than anything else. And some of the kids want to learn, but a lot of the kids, maybe an alternative would be better.
Well, that's the advantage of choice. That's what school choice means. School choice means that you decide where your kids go to school and what kind of an education your kids will get. You do a better job than the government will, and better than the teachers.
Okay. So in any event, this piece obviously shows that the Clintons and Obamas have been, and anybody else who argues school choice and argues government schools and then sends their kids to private schools is clearly disingenuous with the American public, and which
does that mean dishonest? That's the same.
Yeah, it's one of those fancy words for that. But it also is a good way for us to start questioning the value of that public education, because I don't have any children, and I'm paying that $19,000 a year regardless, because we're all paying taxes and we're all paying for that system. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next topic. And this one, the article is entitled, "Does Al Gore Claim Illegal Aliens Cause Global Warming?" Now, I know that global warming is a major problem, especially here in Brooklyn.
So is Al Gore.
Especially Al Gore is more of a problem in Nashville than he is in Brooklyn, but he's definitely a problem. So the real issue is, do those illegal aliens cause global warming, and what can we do to stop them?
Okay, well, the point of this article was not necessarily that illegal aliens are going to save America, but they sometimes get a bad rap. And I think we have to keep things in perspective. Illegal aliens don't do all of the bad things that they're accused of doing, and we should understand what they do and separate the truths from the falsehoods so we can make an intelligent decision. Okay, my article was titled, as Mark said, "Does Al Gore Claim Illegal Aliens Cause Global Warming?" Because they're accused of claiming of causing everything else. Illegal immigrants have been blamed for just about everything in this country except global warming. So when Texas Governor Rick Perry suggested that it might be okay to subsidize college tuition for illegals, his presidential bid was probably ended. But should it have been? After all, live free or die was replaced by live for free or die in many parts of this country way before illegals came along. But they don't pay taxes. Well, actually, they do pay taxes. They just don't pay income taxes usually. They still pay sales taxes, utility taxes, phone taxes, user fees, not user fees, user only on alternate side parking, suspended day fees, etc. Call me the next time you hear, "Okay, that's one flannel shirt, 2 pairs of socks, underwear with tax comes to $83.95. No, senor, I am the illegal. I don't pay no taxes. Oh, sorry, Mr. Illegal. Let's see now. Okay, that will be $65 even. And about those income taxes, most illegals earn little enough that they wouldn't pay income taxes even if they were citizens. The real money is in plastics, not lettuce. But they steal American jobs. If American citizens would be willing to take the jobs that these folks steal, we wouldn't have to listen to the president every other week telling Congress to pass all those cockamamie jobs bills right now. He could just go on national TV and point, "My fellow Americans, walk that way, knock on that door over there, and say, 'I'm here for the job. Good night.'" Even the discouraged workers don't want them. By the way, do any of these discouraged workers ever get too discouraged to eat? Anyway, if it were up to me, I'd think about restarting a guest worker program. Only thing I'd change would be to add a requirement for all the guests to do a few hours of volunteer work every couple of weeks. Nursing homes, hospitals, could it cut costs enough to save Medicaid from bankruptcy and still allow us to take care of all the people who need taken care of? Who knows? This country was built on immigration and volunteerism. And maybe, with luck, we can someday get back to what America once was. To give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free instead of good fences make good neighbors.
Thank you, Steve. So clearly, what we're saying here is that a land of opportunity, a land that permits people to come and make something for themselves, is preferable to this walled society that some of our presidents have indicated, and that even some of the candidates running in the primaries now have indicated, for these horrible people who are going to come across the border and wash the floors and work in the chicken factories. And
well, my idea was that that they should be allowed to come with a guest worker program, which is not an original idea. It's been proposed many times before, that we should fingerprint them, iris print them, do whatever we have to do, make sure that the people that come here are not the criminals and they're not the terrorists, and then in return for their coming here, ask them to give us a little volunteer work. I know that that doesn't sit well for many of my libertarian friends, but if you ask the people that are coming here as illegal immigrants and you give them the choice, do they want to keep the situation as it is now, where they can't make a decent living because the boss can turn them in, because they're always waiting for that knock in the middle of the night saying immigration, throwing them back out, or do they want to come here legally and in return spend a few hours of volunteer time to give to this country? I think I know what the answer would be. And we would have a lot less problems, because one of the reasons that immigrants, that when they're illegal, bring their whole families here is because they can't go back and visit them. Once they're here, if they go out, they got to sneak back in again.
Well, that's the problem with our border system.
If they're legal and they have papers, then the families can stay back home, and they can just go back and visit them whenever they want, come back and forth.
No, then you've got freedom of movement, and you're giving individuals rights that, you know, as opposed to arbitrary lines on the ground that our, you know, our protectors want to have. So
okay.
I don't know if that's going to go over real well with those powers that be in Washington. Well, you know, Steve, this article though is a very good example of what you've been doing in all these articles, and that is using humor and then turning it serious a little bit towards the end to make a point, and that is that...
right. This is not a humorous column with political overtones. It's a political column with a little humor.
No, I think that's very well appreciated. And if our viewers would like to find out a little bit about the Libertarian Party and the movement and the kind of ideas that Steve and I are discussing, then I welcome the viewers to get onto the websites of any of the various libertarian organizations with which Steve and I are affiliated. The National Party, you can get on www.lp.org. Two of the very active chapters right here are the Manhattan and Brooklyn Libertarian Parties, www.manhattanlp.org for the Manhattan chapter, and here in Brooklyn, where we're taping this fine show, www.brooklynlp.org. And on both of those sites, you'll find links to this television show, to Surf City, to various other organizations.
To my blog.
And to Steve's blog. That's right.
Where all the articles are listed.
And Steve, what is the blog for that?
It's www.thepointingfinger.blogspot.com.
And the pointing finger, of course, is Steve Finger, who is my guest tonight, who has been pointing that finger in several directions. And we have time for one more column. So, Steve, why don't we do one more column?
Which one do you want,
And
Mark?
let's do Occupy Mount Olympus. Okay. And let me set this one up first, because Steve and I discussed which columns to read tonight. And, of course, the Occupy Wall Street movement was very much in the news in the latter part of 2011. Now, we're taping this in the wintertime, and needless to say, it's a little cold to be out in Zuccotti Park.
Brr.
But that doesn't mean, this is the doctor telling me that it's cold, that doesn't mean that...
You're trying to set the stage.
That doesn't mean that we won't see the Occupy movement back again. So what happens back in ancient Greece if we weren't just occupying Wall Street now, but we were occupying Mount Olympus?
Okay, well, this is just something that I put together just as sort of a goof during the part of the Occupy movement. For if it gives you a laugh, good. If it doesn't, well. It's called Occupy Mount Olympus. Maximus Harmonius lived on the slopes of Mount Olympus, where he spent his days contentedly making hummus, which he sold to the people in the village below at a handsome profit. One day there was a loud knocking at the door. It was his childhood friend Protestius. Ah, Protestius, where's my gift? Wrong Greek. Well, no matter, come in. I have come to occupy you, Maximus. Occupy me? What does that mean, to occupy me? Well, I did not exactly know, but I know that I must do it. But why, Protestius? Why must you occupy me? Because my goats give no milk, and I cannot afford to repay the loans I needed to buy them. It's all your fault. But Protestius, I told you that there would be no milk. They are all male goats. Males do not give milk. The fault, I am sorry to tell you, my dear friend, is yours and yours alone. And it's not in your stars either. You should have used the money to go to college. Do not be impertinent, Maximos Harmonius. And what of the decaying roads and bridges? Are they also my fault? How are they to be repaired? With taxes, Protestius, as always. The workers work, get paid, and then pay taxes out of their wages. Maximos, this is Greece. The workers do not work. Then why are they called workers? No one knows. You mean that I, with my hummus, am the only worker in all of Greece who works? And that is the reason I must be occupied? Speak of Greek tragedies. And so it came to pass that Maximos Harmonius was occupied, saw the error of his ways, and began producing hummus like nobody's business. Soon there was enough to spread around, so that there was plenty for everyone in Greece to have his fill. The rich, as we all know, can do that if they really want to. And everyone lived happily ever after. And we're indebted to the Democratic National Committee for permission to print the above, this last paragraph, from the 2012 Democratic Party presidential platform. We have a little preview.
Very good. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome,
and,
Mark.
and thank you, viewers, for being with us tonight at Hardfire. We've had a good exposure to several different columns on several different topics by Dr. Steve Finger, the pointing finger. I urge you to take a look at Steve's website and read his blog, and to read his pieces in the Canarsie Courier, and also to get on the websites of the Brooklyn LP or the Manhattan LP, and to support those fine organizations. Clearly, we can see that the message of freedom is important, and there are many, many good ways to bring that message to the people, including through wonderfully funny, pithy columns, such as those which Dr. Steve Finger has been writing. Steve, thank you so much for being with me tonight at Hardfire.
My pleasure.
And viewers, please join us again next week for another issue of Hardfire. Thank you.